In the summer of 2018, the world watched as two of the most powerful figures on the planet walked side by side across the ancient grounds of Windsor Castle. One was a 92-year-old monarch who had spent 7 decades mastering the art of diplomacy and royal protocol. The other was a 72-year-old businessman turned president who had built his reputation on breaking conventional rules and speaking his mind without filter. What happened during those carefully choreographed moments would reveal more than just a ceremonial inspection of the Queen's Guard. It would showcase a fascinating dance between tradition and disruption, between a woman who had welcomed 12 American presidents and a man who prided himself on doing things differently than anyone before him. The cameras captured every step, every gesture, every subtle moment of guidance, as Queen Elizabeth II demonstrated why she remained one of the world's most respected leaders, even while hosting one of its most controversial. This is the story of how royal grace met political power, and what unfolded when protocol became the stage for an unforgettable encounter between two very different kinds of authority. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Windsor Castle as palace staff made their final preparations for what many considered one of the most unusual state visits in recent British history. Queen Elizabeth II stood at her private apartment window, watching the last-minute adjustments being made to the ceremonial arrangements. At 92 years old, she had welcomed countless world leaders to this same spot, but today felt different. Today, she would host Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States, a man whose unconventional approach to diplomacy had already caused ripples throughout the international community. The invitation itself had been months in the making, involving delicate negotiations between Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, and the White House. Prime Minister Theresa May had extended the initial invitation to President Trump during her visit to Washington in January 2017, but the actual planning had proven far more complex than anyone anticipated. The Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Young, had worked closely with American advance teams to create an itinerary that would satisfy both the pomp and circumstance expected of a royal welcome while accommodating the unique requirements and preferences of the American president. Behind the scenes, palace staff had spent weeks studying Trump's previous international visits, noting his preferences, his body language during formal ceremonies, and his tendency to deviate from scripted protocols. They observed how he had walked slightly ahead of other world leaders, how he favored firm handshakes that lasted longer than diplomatic convention typically allowed, and how he often seemed more comfortable in less formal settings. The Queen, however, had insisted that certain traditions would remain unchanged. The inspection of the Guard of Honor was one such tradition that she personally valued, having conducted hundreds of these ceremonies throughout her reign. The controversy surrounding the visit had been building for months. Protests were planned across London, with organizers expecting tens of thousands of demonstrators to voice their opposition to Trump's policies. Security measures have been unprecedented, with multiple agencies coordinating to ensure both the safety of the visiting president and the protection of British institutions. The famous Trump baby balloon had already become a symbol of the opposition, though it would be kept far from Windsor Castle during the official ceremonies. For Queen Elizabeth II, however, politics had always remained separate from her constitutional duties. Throughout her 66-year reign, she had maintained strict political neutrality while hosting leaders from across the political spectrum. She had welcomed communist leaders from China, controversial figures from various nations, and presidents and prime ministers whose policies had sparked international debate. Her role as head of state required her to represent Britain's interests while maintaining the dignity of the crown, regardless of her personal opinions about her guests. The American delegation had arrived at Stansted Airport the previous evening, with President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump traveling aboard Air Force One. The sight of the iconic blue and white aircraft touching down on British soil had drawn crowds of onlookers and protesters alike. Trump had immediately taken to Twitter, praising the tremendous welcome he had received and expressing his excitement about meeting the Queen. His social media activity had become a constant source of fascination and concern for diplomatic protocol experts who worried about potential breaches of royal etiquette. As the morning progressed, the Queen's dresser, Angela Kelly, helped her select the perfect outfit for the occasion. The choice of attire for royal engagements was never arbitrary. Every color, every brooch, every accessory carried symbolic meaning. For this visit, the Queen chose a bright blue ensemble that would photograph well against the Windsor Castle backdrop and complement the ceremonial uniforms of the Guard of Honor. Her choice of jewelry included a brooch with special significance to Anglo-American relations, a subtle nod to the special relationship between the two nations that had endured through both harmonious and challenging periods. The Guard of Honor had been preparing since dawn, with soldiers from the Coldstream Guards ensuring their uniforms were pristine and their ceremonial movements were perfectly coordinated. The inspection route had been measured precisely, with palace staff marking the exact positions where the Queen and her guest would stop, turn, and observe the troops. The military band had rehearsed their musical selections, choosing pieces that would honor both British tradition and American heritage. Inside the castle, the Queen's private staff briefed her on the latest developments regarding the visit. They discussed the planned route for the inspection, the timing of each element, and the potential challenges that might arise given President Trump's well-documented tendency to improvise during formal ceremonies. The Queen listened carefully, asking pointed questions about contingencies and backup plans. Her decades of experience had taught her that successful state visits required meticulous preparation combined with the flexibility to adapt when unexpected situations arose. The media presence at Windsor Castle was overwhelming, with journalists from around the world positioning themselves to capture every moment of the historic meeting. Television crews had set up elaborate equipment to broadcast the ceremonies live to millions of viewers across the globe. The intense media scrutiny added another layer of complexity to the already challenging task of managing protocol, while ensuring the visit achieved its diplomatic objectives. American security officials had conducted extensive advance work at Windsor Castle, coordinating with their British counterparts to establish secure perimeters and communication protocols. The Secret Service had worked closely with British protection officers to ensure that presidential security requirements could be met without compromising the traditional elements of the royal ceremony. This collaboration had required weeks of planning and multiple site visits to address potential security concerns. The Queen had spent the previous evening reviewing briefing materials prepared by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, familiarizing herself with current American domestic and international policies. Her preparation for state visits was always thorough, as she prided herself on being well-informed about her guests' backgrounds, current challenges, and key accomplishments. She understood that her conversations with world leaders, however brief, could have lasting diplomatic significance. As the appointed time approached, the Queen made her way to the grand entrance of Windsor Castle, where she would officially welcome President Trump and the First Lady. Her private secretary accompanied her, carrying the carefully choreographed schedule that would guide the next several hours. The Queen's corgis had been secured in their private quarters, as palace staff had learned from previous visits that not all world leaders were comfortable around the royal pets. The sound of helicopter rotors announced the arrival of Marine One, the presidential helicopter that would transport Trump from the American ambassador's residence to Windsor Castle. The distinctive green and white aircraft circled the castle once before landing on the designated area of the castle's grounds, its arrival marking the beginning of a carefully orchestrated diplomatic ballet that would unfold over the next several hours. Palace staff took their positions along the route, each person understanding their specific role in ensuring the visit proceeded smoothly. The Queen's equerry stood ready to manage introductions, while her lady-in-waiting prepared to assist with any protocol questions that might arise. The level of coordination required for such events had been perfected over decades of royal entertaining. Yet each visit brought unique challenges that tested the adaptability of the entire royal household. The Queen checked her watch one final time, a gesture that had become habitual during her many years of hosting foreign dignitaries. Punctuality was one of the royal virtues she valued most highly, and she expected the same precision from her guests. The stage was set for an encounter that would test both her legendary diplomatic skills and President Trump's ability to adapt to the formal traditions of British royalty. As the helicopter engines wound down and the presidential party prepared to disembark, the Queen straightened her shoulders and prepared to extend the full hospitality of the British crown to the American president. Whatever personal reservations she might have harbored about this particular guest remained hidden behind the composed expression that had served her well through countless diplomatic challenges. The moment had arrived for protocol to meet politics and for two very different styles of leadership to find common ground on the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. The massive wooden doors of Windsor Castle's grand entrance swung open as President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump stepped onto the red carpet that had been precisely positioned for their arrival. The Queen stood waiting in the doorway, her bright blue outfit creating a striking contrast against the ancient stone walls behind her. This moment, captured by dozens of cameras from around the world, would become one of the defining images of Trump's presidency and a testament to the enduring power of royal protocol. As Trump approached, palace staff held their breath, wondering how the famously unpredictable American president would navigate his first face-to-face encounter with the British monarch. The Queen extended her hand in the traditional greeting, and Trump, to the relief of protocol experts, responded appropriately with a gentle handshake rather than his characteristic firm grip. However, what happened next surprised even the most experienced royal watchers. The Queen, demonstrating the conversational skills that had made her legendary among world leaders, immediately put Trump at ease with her warm demeanor and genuine interest in his journey to Britain. She inquired about his flight, commented on the beautiful summer weather, and made subtle references to the long history of cooperation between Britain and America. Trump, who had appeared slightly tense during his approach, visibly relaxed as the Queen's natural charm worked its magic. Melania Trump received an equally warm welcome, with the Queen complimenting her elegant white outfit and engaging her in conversation about their shared interest in supporting military families. The First Lady, who had been briefed extensively on royal protocol by the American Embassy staff, executed a perfect curtsy that drew an approving nod from the Queen's lady-in-waiting. The sight of these three women from vastly different backgrounds finding immediate common ground provided a moment of grace that seemed to set a positive tone for the entire visit. Inside the castle, the Queen led her guests through the grand reception room, pointing out historical artifacts and sharing anecdotes about previous American presidents who had visited Windsor. She mentioned Franklin Roosevelt's wartime visits, John F. Kennedy's charm during his meetings with her family, and Ronald Reagan's love of horseback riding during his stay at the castle. Trump listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his genuine interest in the stories behind the portraits and furnishings that surrounded them. The Queen's ability to make her guests feel simultaneously honored and comfortable had been honed through decades of diplomatic entertaining. She understood that successful state visits required more than just ceremonial pomp. They needed genuine human connection to achieve their diplomatic objectives. As she guided Trump through the castle's historic corridors, she shared carefully chosen details about the castle's 900-year history, weaving together stories of kings and queens, battles, and celebrations that helped place their meeting in the broader context of Anglo-American relations. Palace staff had strategically positioned themselves throughout the route, ready to assist with any protocol questions or logistical needs. The Queen's private secretary walked at a discreet distance, monitoring the timing to ensure they would arrive at the inspection site precisely on schedule. The military band had already taken their positions on the castle lawn, their instruments gleaming in the afternoon sunlight as they prepared to provide musical accompaniment for the ceremonial inspection. As they moved through the castle, Trump's security detail worked seamlessly with British protection officers to maintain the necessary security perimeter without disrupting the flow of the royal tour. The coordination between American and British security services had been practiced extensively in advance, with both sides understanding that any visible tension or confusion could undermine the diplomatic objectives of the visit. The Queen paused at one of the castle's great windows, pointing out the view of the Long Walk, the tree-lined avenue that stretched for miles from the castle toward London. She explained how this vista had been designed to demonstrate the power and permanence of the British monarchy, while also serving as a practical reminder of the connection between the crown and the British people. Trump stood beside her, taking in a magnificent view, while palace photographers discreetly captured the moment for the official record. Their conversation during this private tour revealed the Queen's remarkable ability to find common ground with even the most challenging guests. She discussed Trump's business background, showing genuine interest in his experiences with large-scale construction projects and international business negotiations. Trump, in turn, expressed his admiration for the Queen's longevity in her role and her reputation as one of the world's most respected leaders. The Queen had deliberately chosen to conduct this portion of the visit in a more intimate setting, away from the intense media scrutiny that would accompany the outdoor ceremonies. This private time allowed both leaders to establish a personal rapport that would prove crucial during the more formal elements of the visit. She understood that Trump, like many powerful leaders, responded well to personal attention and genuine interest in his perspectives and experiences. As they approached the point where they would exit the castle for the guard inspection, the Queen's equerry briefed both leaders on the protocol for the upcoming ceremony. The Queen would lead the inspection, with Trump walking slightly behind and, to her right, following the traditional positioning for visiting heads of state. They would pause at predetermined points to observe the guard's ceremonial positions, and the Queen would provide commentary about the military traditions they were witnessing. Trump listened carefully to these instructions, asking specific questions about timing and positioning that demonstrated his understanding of the ceremony's importance. His advance team had briefed him extensively on royal protocol, but hearing the details directly from the Queen's staff seemed to reinforce his commitment to following the established procedures. The Queen observed this interaction with satisfaction, recognizing that Trump's attention to these details indicated his respect for the institution she represented. The First Lady had been escorted to a separate area where she would observe the ceremony alongside other distinguished guests, including members of the royal household and senior British officials. Her position had been carefully chosen to provide excellent views of the proceedings while ensuring she remained within the appropriate protocol boundaries for a spouse during a military ceremony. Outside, the Coldstream Guards stood in perfect formation, their red tunics and distinctive bearskin hats creating the iconic image that millions around the world associated with British royal ceremonies. Each guard had been selected for this honor based on their exemplary service record and their ability to maintain composure under intense public scrutiny. They understood that their performance during this inspection would be watched by millions and would reflect not only on their regiment, but on the entire British military. The Queen checked her appearance one final time in a full-length mirror position near the exit, adjusting her hat and ensuring her brooch was perfectly positioned. Her dresser stood nearby, ready to make any last-minute adjustments, though the Queen's decades of experience had made such interventions rarely necessary. She had conducted hundreds of these inspections, but each one required the same level of attention to detail and commitment to excellence. As they prepared to step outside, the Queen turned to Trump with a slight smile and offered a final piece of guidance that would prove crucial in the moments to come. She explained that the inspection would follow a specific route and timing, but assured him that she would guide him through each step. Her confidence and gentle authority in this moment revealed why she had successfully navigated the complexities of constitutional monarchy for more than 6 decades. The sound of the military band tuning their instruments could be heard through the castle walls, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and ceremony. Palace staff made final checks of the red carpet that would guide the royal party to their starting position, ensuring that every detail was perfect for the inspection that was about to begin. Trump straightened his tie and checked his appearance, understanding that millions of people around the world would scrutinize every aspect of his behavior during the ceremony. The weight of representing the United States in this formal royal setting was evident in his unusually serious demeanor as they prepared to make their entrance. The Queen took a deep breath, a habit she had developed over decades of public appearances to center herself before important ceremonies. At her signal, the castle doors would open, and they would step into the bright summer sunlight to begin an inspection that would demonstrate both the enduring strength of Anglo-American relations and the remarkable ability of royal protocol to bring together leaders from vastly different backgrounds and political traditions. The great doors of Windsor Castle opened with ceremonial precision as the Queen emerged into the brilliant afternoon sunlight, her blue ensemble immediately catching the attention of photographers positioned around the castle grounds. President Trump appeared beside her, and the contrast between the diminutive 92-year-old monarch and the tall American president created a striking visual that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. What unfolded in the next few minutes would demonstrate the Queen's masterful command of royal protocol and her ability to guide even the most unconventional world leaders through the intricacies of British ceremonial tradition. The Coldstream Guards stood in perfect formation across the castle's carefully manicured lawn, their scarlet tunics blazing against the green grass and ancient stone walls. Each soldier represented years of training and tradition, selected not only for their military excellence, but for their ability to maintain absolute composure under the intense scrutiny of international media. The sight of these guards in their full ceremonial regalia never failed to impress visiting dignitaries. But today's inspection carried additional significance as the world watched to see how President Trump would navigate this quintessentially British tradition. As they approached the starting position for the inspection, the Queen moved with the practiced grace of someone who had conducted this ceremony countless times throughout her reign. She positioned herself precisely at the designated mark, then turned slightly toward Trump with a subtle gesture that indicated where he should stand. This moment revealed the first glimpse of what would become a masterclass in diplomatic guidance, as the Queen managed to direct Trump's positioning without making it obvious to the watching world that she was providing instruction. Trump, who had built his reputation on commanding attention and leading from the front in business and political settings, found himself in the unusual position of following someone else's lead. The Queen's natural authority and the weight of royal tradition seemed to have a calming effect on the normally assertive president. He took his position slightly behind and, to her right, exactly as protocol demanded, his usual tendency to step forward and dominate photo opportunities notably absent as he deferred to his royal host. The military band struck up the opening notes of the ceremony, their music echoing off the castle walls and creating an atmosphere of solemn pageantry that had remained unchanged for centuries. The Queen stood perfectly still during the musical introduction, her posture demonstrating the dignity and reverence appropriate for honoring military service. Trump, observing her example, adopted a similar stance, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture that mirrored the Queen's own positioning. As the music concluded, the Queen began to move forward, and the inspection officially commenced. Her pace was deliberate and measured, allowing time for proper observation of each guard while maintaining the ceremonial dignity of the occasion. Trump followed her lead, matching her pace and maintaining the appropriate distance that protocol required. The sight of these two world leaders moving in perfect synchronization demonstrated the power of royal ceremony to transcend political differences and create moments of shared respect and tradition. The Queen's approach to the inspection revealed decades of experience in making these ceremonies meaningful for both the participating soldiers and the observing dignitaries. As they passed each guard, she would pause briefly, her gaze taking in every detail of the soldier's appearance and bearing. These pauses were not merely ceremonial. They represented genuine acknowledgement of military service and sacrifice, something the Queen valued deeply given her own constitutional role as Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces. Trump's behavior during these pauses showed his growing appreciation for the ceremony's significance. Rather than appearing impatient or distracted, as some observers had feared, he seemed genuinely engaged with the proceedings. When the Queen would stop to observe a particular guard, Trump would follow her example, taking time to acknowledge the soldier's presence with appropriate gravity. This adaptation to royal protocol surprised many who had expected the famously impulsive president to struggle with the ceremony's formal requirements. The Queen's commentary during the inspection provided Trump with valuable context about what they were witnessing. She explained the history of the Coldstream Guards, their role in protecting the monarchy, and the significance of their ceremonial uniforms. Her ability to share this information while maintaining the dignity of the ceremony demonstrated her skill at education through example, helping Trump understand not just what to do, but why these traditions mattered to British national identity. The international media captured every step of the inspection, with photographers using telephoto lenses to document the subtle interactions between the Queen and Trump. Body language experts would later analyze these images extensively, noting Trump's unusually restrained demeanor and the Queen's gentle but firm guidance throughout the ceremony. The visual narrative created by their movements told a story of mutual respect developing between two very different types of leaders. As they reached the center point of the inspection route, the Queen demonstrated one of her most impressive diplomatic skills by seamlessly adjusting the pace and positioning to account for Trump's longer stride and different natural rhythm. This adaptation was so subtle that most observers never noticed it, but experienced royal watchers recognized it as an example of the Queen's legendary ability to make her guests feel comfortable while maintaining protocol standards. The guards themselves provided a stunning backdrop for the diplomatic theater unfolding before them. Each soldier stood motionless, their eyes focused straight ahead, embodying the discipline and tradition that made the British military ceremony famous worldwide. The contrast between their absolute stillness and the careful movement of the inspecting party created a visual dynamic that emphasized both the solemnity of military service and the active role of civilian leadership in honoring that service. Trump's questions during the inspection revealed his genuine interest in understanding what he was experiencing. He asked about the guards' training, their service records, and the history of their regiment. The Queen answered each question with a detailed knowledge that came from her decades of involvement with the British military. Her responses helping Trump appreciate the depth of tradition and professionalism he was witnessing. The Queen's handling of the inspection timing showed her mastery of ceremonial pacing. She understood that the ceremony needed to be long enough to demonstrate proper respect for the military participants, while not becoming so extended that it lost its impact or tried the patience of the participants. Her internal sense of timing, developed through thousands of similar events, allowed her to gauge the perfect moment for each transition and pause. Halfway through the inspection, a subtle moment occurred that perfectly encapsulated the developing dynamic between the Queen and Trump. As they approached a particularly distinguished guard who wore additional ceremonial decorations, the Queen paused longer than usual, clearly intending to draw Trump's attention to this soldier's special status. Trump, reading her cue perfectly, also extended his pause and gave the guard additional acknowledgement through his posture and attention. The precision of the ceremony's choreography became even more apparent as they moved through the second half of the inspection route. Every element, from the positioning of the guards to the timing of the musical accompaniment, had been planned to create a seamless experience that honored both military tradition and the visiting dignitary. The Queen's role in orchestrating this complex ceremony, while making it appear effortless, demonstrated why she remained one of the world's most respected ceremonial leaders. As they neared the conclusion of the inspection, the Queen's subtle guidance helped Trump prepare for the final elements of the ceremony. She positioned him for the concluding musical tribute and the traditional acknowledgement of the guard service. Throughout this process, her ability to lead without appearing to instruct had created an atmosphere where Trump could participate with dignity while learning to appreciate traditions that were foreign to his own experience. The crowd of observers, including diplomats, royal household members, and carefully selected guests, watched in evident satisfaction as the ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Many had worried about potential protocol breaches or awkward moments, but the Queen's skillful management of the proceedings had created instead a demonstration of how royal tradition could successfully accommodate even the most unconventional visitors. The final moments of the inspection approach promised to test both leaders' ability to conclude the ceremony with the appropriate dignity and mutual respect that had characterized their entire interaction. The Queen prepared to guide Trump through the concluding elements, confident that the rapport they had established would carry them successfully through to the end of this historic ceremony. As the Queen and President Trump reached the final section of the guard inspection, a remarkable transformation had taken place that few observers had anticipated when the ceremony began. The initial uncertainty about how these two vastly different leaders would interact had given way to a display of mutual respect and understanding that highlighted the unique power of royal protocol to bridge political and cultural divides. The Queen's masterful guidance had not only prevented any diplomatic missteps, but had actually created moments of genuine connection that would resonate far beyond the formal requirements of the state visit. The concluding phase of the inspection required the most delicate handling, as this was traditionally when visiting dignitaries were expected to acknowledge the guard's service through specific gestures and positioning. The Queen, recognizing that Trump might not be familiar with these particular traditions, stepped slightly closer to him and spoke in low tones that the watching media could not capture. Her words, delivered with the same gentle authority she had shown throughout the ceremony, provided him with the exact guidance he needed to participate appropriately in this final tribute to British military excellence. Trump's response to the Queen's instruction demonstrated how effectively her diplomatic approach had worked throughout the visit. Rather than showing any sign of impatience or resistance to being guided, he listened carefully and followed her directions with evident respect for both her authority and the traditions she represented. This moment of private communication between the two leaders, conducted in full view of the world's media, but beyond their hearing, became a symbol of how personal diplomacy could transcend political differences. The guards themselves had maintained their perfect composure throughout the entire inspection, but experienced military observers noted subtle signs that they too appreciated the respect and attention they were receiving from both the Queen and her distinguished guest. The slight straightening of shoulders, the almost imperceptible adjustment of posture, and the focused attention in their forward-facing gaze all indicated their pride in representing British military tradition before such a high-profile international audience. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, the Queen demonstrated another aspect of her diplomatic mastery by creating a moment for Trump to shine within the established protocol. She positioned herself slightly to allow him a clear view of the assembled guards and paused her own movement to give him time to acknowledge their service in his own way. This subtle choreography allowed Trump to feel like an active participant in honoring the military rather than simply a passive observer following royal direction. The international media covering the event had expected to document potential friction or awkward moments between the unconventional American president and the traditional British monarch. Instead, they found themselves recording a masterclass in diplomatic grace as the Queen's experience and Trump's willingness to adapt created an unexpectedly harmonious ceremony. The positive tone of the coverage would later contribute to improve perceptions of both leaders and strengthen the diplomatic relationship between their two nations. Behind the scenes, palace staff watched the proceedings with evident relief and satisfaction. The months of careful planning and preparation had paid off, as the Queen's natural diplomatic skills combined with Trump's surprising adaptability to create exactly the kind of positive international image that successful state visits were designed to produce. The ceremony's success would be discussed in diplomatic circles for years as an example of how personal chemistry and mutual respect could overcome potential political obstacles. The Queen's ability to read Trump's personality and adjust her approach accordingly had been crucial to the inspection's success. She had recognized early in their interaction that he responded well to genuine interest in his perspectives and experiences, so throughout the ceremony she had included him in conversations about military leadership, international cooperation, and the shared values that united Britain and America despite their political differences. Trump, for his part, had shown a side of his personality that many observers rarely saw in his more combative political appearances. His respectful demeanor, careful attention to protocol, and evident appreciation for the ceremony's traditions revealed a capacity for diplomatic behavior that even his critics had to acknowledge. This transformation seemed to occur naturally in response to the Queen's welcoming but authoritative presence. The timing of the ceremony had been planned to take advantage of the perfect summer weather and optimal lighting for photography, but it also reflected the Queen's understanding of how to pace formal events for maximum impact. The inspection had been long enough to demonstrate proper respect for military service, while remaining engaging for observers, and the gradual building of rapport between the Queen and Trump had created a narrative arc that held the attention of viewers worldwide. As they prepared for the final elements of the ceremony, the Queen's equerry signaled to the military band to prepare for the concluding musical tribute. This coordination between royal household staff and military personnel exemplified the seamless cooperation that made royal ceremonies appear effortless while actually requiring extensive planning and precise execution. Every person involved in the ceremony understood their role in creating an event that would reflect well on both Britain and its distinguished guest. The Queen's commentary during the final phase of the inspection became more personal and reflective, as she shared with Trump her own experiences as commander-in-chief and her deep appreciation for military service. These personal touches transformed what could have been a purely ceremonial experience into a meaningful exchange between two leaders who shared responsibility for their nation's armed forces. Trump's responses showed his genuine engagement with these themes and his growing understanding of the ceremony's deeper significance. The contrast between this moment and Trump's more controversial public appearances was stark and would not be lost on political observers. The Queen's influence seemed to bring out a more presidential demeanor in her guest, demonstrating the power of institutional dignity and personal grace to elevate diplomatic encounters. This transformation would be cited by supporters as evidence of Trump's ability to rise to important occasions when circumstances demanded it. The gathered audience of diplomats, royal household members, and distinguished guests had witnessed something remarkable during the inspection. Beyond the successful completion of ceremonial requirements, they had seen two strong personalities find common ground through mutual respect and shared commitment to honoring military service. The positive atmosphere created during the inspection would carry over into the remainder of the state visit and contribute to its overall diplomatic success. As the final musical notes of the ceremony began to play, both the Queen and Trump assumed the positions appropriate for the concluding tribute to the Guards. Their synchronized movements and shared focus on honoring the assembled soldiers created a powerful visual symbol of Anglo-American cooperation and friendship. The ceremony that had begun with uncertainty and potential for diplomatic difficulty had evolved into a demonstration of how personal diplomacy and institutional tradition could combine to create meaningful international relationships. The Queen's satisfaction with the proceedings was evident in her relaxed posture and genuine smile as they approached the ceremony's end. Her ability to guide Trump successfully through this complex protocol while maintaining her own dignity and the ceremony's traditional significance represented a diplomatic achievement that would enhance her already legendary reputation as a hostess to world leaders. The success of this moment would pave the way for the private tea that would follow, where even more substantial diplomatic conversations could take place away from the intense public scrutiny of the formal ceremonies. The final moments of the Guard inspection at Windsor Castle marked more than just the conclusion of a ceremonial event. They represented a diplomatic triumph that would reverberate through international relations for years to come. As the Queen and President Trump completed their review of the Coldstream Guards, the transformation in their relationship from polite strangers to respectful colleagues had become evident to everyone present. The ceremony that many had feared might become a source of international embarrassment had instead become a masterful demonstration of how personal diplomacy and institutional tradition could create bridges across political and cultural divides. The concluding musical tribute played by the military band provided a stirring backdrop as both leaders stood side by side, acknowledging the service and sacrifice represented by the assembled guards. The Queen's positioning during this final moment was deliberately chosen to allow Trump equal prominence in the ceremony's conclusion, a gesture that demonstrated her understanding of American expectations for presidential dignity while maintaining British ceremonial traditions. This careful balance between honoring her guest and preserving royal protocol had characterized the entire inspection and would be studied by diplomatic experts as an example of successful cultural adaptation. As the music faded and the formal ceremony concluded, the Queen turned to Trump with words of appreciation for his participation in the inspection that were captured by the closest microphones. Her praise for his respectful attention to British military traditions and his genuine interest in the ceremony's significance helped cement the positive tone that had developed throughout their interaction. Trump's response, expressing his honor at being included in such a meaningful tribute to military service, revealed a level of diplomatic grace that surprised many observers who had expected more controversial behavior. The walk back toward Windsor Castle provided an opportunity for more private conversation between the Queen and Trump, away from the intense scrutiny of the formal ceremony. Palace staff noted the relaxed body language of both leaders as they discussed their shared experiences with military leadership and the challenges of maintaining public support for armed forces in democratic societies. These conversations, while brief, helped establish the personal connection that would make their subsequent private tea more substantive and productive. The immediate reaction from international media was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising both the Queen's masterful handling of a potentially difficult situation and Trump's unexpected adherence to royal protocol. The images of the inspection, particularly those showing the Queen gently guiding Trump through ceremonial requirements while maintaining her own dignity and authority, would become iconic representations of successful international diplomacy. These photographs would be used in diplomatic training programs for years as examples of how personal chemistry could overcome political differences. The impact of the ceremony extended beyond immediate diplomatic benefits to influence public perception of both leaders in their respective countries. In Britain, the Queen's handling of the Trump visit reinforced her reputation as a skilled diplomat capable of representing British interests while maintaining royal dignity regardless of political circumstances. Her ability to find common ground with even the most challenging guests demonstrated why the monarchy remained a valuable institution for British soft power projection around the world. In America, the positive coverage of Trump's behavior during the royal visit provided his supporters with evidence of his ability to represent the United States with appropriate dignity on the international stage. The contrast between his respectful demeanor during the ceremony and his more combative political persona sparked discussions about the role of institutional settings in shaping presidential behavior. Political scientists would later analyze this visit as an example of how formal diplomatic protocols could moderate controversial leaders and create opportunities for more productive international relationships. The ceremony's success had immediate practical benefits for Anglo-American relations, as it helped establish a foundation of personal respect between the Queen and Trump that facilitated more substantive diplomatic conversations during their private meeting. The Queen's subsequent discussions with Prime Minister Theresa May emphasize the potential for continued cooperation with the Trump administration, despite policy differences that had strained the relationship in previous months. This royal endorsement of productive engagement helped British officials develop more effective strategies for managing their relationship with an unconventional American president. The international diplomatic community took notice of how the Queen had successfully managed what many considered one of the more challenging state visits of her reign. Foreign ambassadors and diplomatic protocol experts studied the ceremony closely, noting the specific techniques the Queen had used to guide Trump while allowing him to maintain dignity and authority. These observations would influence how other world leaders prepared for their own meetings with Trump and contributed to more successful diplomatic encounters throughout the remainder of his presidency. The ceremony also had significant implications for public understanding of royal protocol and its continuing relevance in modern diplomacy. Many observers who had dismissed ceremonial traditions as outdated pomp gained new appreciation for how these rituals could serve important diplomatic functions by creating structured environments for international cooperation. The Queen's demonstration of how protocol could be both respectful of tradition and adaptive to contemporary challenges helped justify continued investment in ceremonial diplomacy. For the Coldstream Guards who participated in the ceremony, the experience of being reviewed by both their sovereign and the American president represented a highlight of their military careers. The respectful attention they received from both leaders during the inspection reinforced their pride in serving and their appreciation for the traditions they represented. Their subsequent interviews with military publications emphasized how the ceremony had demonstrated the continued importance of ceremonial duties in modern military service. The Queen's private reflection on the visit, shared later with her closest advisors, revealed her satisfaction with having successfully navigated one of the more unpredictable challenges of her reign. Her ability to adapt her time-tested diplomatic approach to work effectively with Trump validated her belief that personal respect and genuine interest in others could transcend political differences. This experience would inform her interactions with other challenging world leaders in the years that followed. The long-term impact of the ceremony extended beyond immediate diplomatic benefits to influence academic study of international relations and ceremonial diplomacy. Universities around the world would use video footage of the inspection in courses on diplomatic protocol, cross-cultural communication, and international leadership. The Queen's techniques for managing difficult personalities while maintaining institutional dignity became case studies in executive leadership programs and diplomatic training initiatives. The ceremony's success also contributed to broader discussions about the role of women in international diplomacy and leadership. The Queen's demonstration of how experience, dignity, and personal authority could guide and influence even the most powerful men provided inspiration for women in leadership positions around the world. Her ability to maintain control of the situation while allowing her guests to save face became a model for effective leadership in challenging circumstances. As the sun set over Windsor Castle that evening, the lasting impact of the guard inspection was already becoming clear. What had begun as a potentially problematic diplomatic encounter had evolved into a demonstration of how skilled leadership and respect for tradition could create opportunities for international cooperation even in the most unlikely circumstances. The Queen's masterful guidance of President Trump through British ceremonial tradition had not only avoided diplomatic disaster, but had actually strengthened the foundation for continued Anglo-American cooperation. The ceremony would be remembered as one of the defining moments of both leaders' legacies, demonstrating the Queen's unparalleled diplomatic skills and revealing a more presidential side of Trump's personality. The images of their respectful collaboration during the inspection would outlast the political controversies of the moment to become symbols of how personal diplomacy could transcend ideological differences and create lasting bonds between nations. In the history of royal entertaining and international relations, the Queen's guidance of Trump during the Windsor Castle Guard inspection would stand as a masterpiece of diplomatic grace under pressure.